Just moving my piles around. I don't know if I have a favorite new author. Can you hear the rain outside? It's raining outside. I need to tell the rain to be quiet. Be quiet, rain. Rain, don't make too much noise. I have a headache. You guys, I have a headache. Why when I film? Every time it rains, I have a headache. Every time it rains, I have a headache. Do other people get headaches when it rains? Which is a small town. I have a headache. Hi everyone, it's me, Jess, and I'm here with Granola. I'm here today with my mid-year freak out tag responses. I'm very happy to be here. It is, however, the first time I'm filming a video since we heard the news here on Booktube about the very sad and very sudden passing of Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that the impact that has had on so many of us, and just to acknowledge the community that we have here on Booktube and the sadness that so many of us feel, the shock that so many of us feel, and just to say that I also have those feelings, and I struggled a little bit with filming today and how to approach filming this video, which is really a video that I've filmed twice before. It's a video that many of us booktubers make once a year. It's one of those videos that so many of us watch one another's versions of. For this to have happened, it would be strange for me not to acknowledge her passing and still go ahead and film as per normal. Just for my experience with Alice, I didn't have a lot of personal experience with Alice, but I watched her and the other women who ran the plot-alongs, the live plot-alongs for the Women's Prize, Gemma and Charlie and Alice. I watched those plot-alongs and participated in many of those plot-alongs as a part of the audience, and I was a big fan. And I did try when I went to the UK, so for those of you who follow my channel, you will know that I just visited the UK, and I did try to actually meet up with Alice, and sadly, well, this was, of course, before she passed. Oh, this is so strange to talk about, but I'm just gonna dive in. No, I'm not gonna. I'm gonna leave it at that. So I just wanted to acknowledge that before I jump into answering these questions. It just reminds me, as I'm often reminded, that things can happen for inexplicable reasons, and they can happen suddenly, and they can happen tragically, and it's really important to, I think it's really important to remember that as we go through our daily lives, and we can take our lessons from it where we want to and how we want to, and we can grieve in whatever way works for us, and we can commemorate Alice in whatever way feels best to us. I noticed a video posted by Elizabeth, and it was a very poignant video, and she had gone to the library and picked up a copy of an Agatha Christie book because Alice was a big fan of Agatha Christie. And I think that that's a lovely way to process some of what has happened. But I think for a lot of people, it's very, very difficult to get your head wrapped around something like that. So my heart goes out to everyone. And yeah, it's just a massive loss. And there's really there's no explanation, there's no way to put words to salve the pain of a loss of someone so young and so bright in our community. So she's definitely in my thoughts, especially when I turn on the camera. Booktube is such an interesting experience. Being part of Booktube is such an interesting experience because you feel this kinship with other booktubers and people in your audience who leave comments. And I certainly felt that with Alice. And I think she touched many people. And it's absolutely heartbreaking that this has happened. So I myself have done this video twice, and so I'm going to leave the last one that I did last year linked, but I'm also going to leave a link to Alice's video for the mid-year freakout tag from last year in the description box below. Okay, so I think there are a couple of different versions of this tag floating around Booktube, and I actually don't know who the original creator was. I looked at my last two videos that I filmed in the few years that I've been on Booktube. I couldn't find in those videos actually anyone to give credit to for this book tag. If there's someone out there who does know who created this tag, that would be amazing. Let me know in the comment section below. I might also skip over one or two of these questions because they don't really apply to my reading, the kind of reading that I do. I think they apply more to people who read fantasy or other types of other genres of books. So the first question is, what is the best book that you've read so far this year? This is always such a difficult question. I spoke already in the quarter year crisis book tag about the books that I read in the first quarter of the year, which still stand as some of the best books I've read this year. The first one was Northwoods by Daniel Mason. The other one was Briefly a Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. I also talked about Invisible Man, which I did a group read of on my channel back in March. And this was an incredible book. It blew my mind. And I'm currently reading a classic that is blowing my mind. So I feel like I need to leave classics maybe out of the conversation for the moment, which feels a little bit strange because I do read a lot of classics, but I will get to the one that I'm reading in a few minutes. But just in terms of newer books, I finally managed to get to Brotherless Night, which was on the long, well, I was going to say it was on the long list for both the Women's Prize and the Carol Shields Prize, but actually it won both of those prizes. I loved this book. I completely agree that it should have won. I can't actually think of another book that I've read that I would put ahead of this book actually for either one of those prizes. I haven't read everything on each of the lists, to be fair, but of the big heavy-hitting books that I did read, which include Soldier, Sailor, Ordinary Human Failings, I have some questions for you, and Then She Fell, and I'm sure there are a couple of others that I can't bring to mind. This is the best that I read out of those groupings. I adored this book. I think the reason why I adored this book so much is that I really thought it was extremely well written. It was very compelling storytelling. And the main character, Sashi, is just a really wonderful character. She's a young woman. She has 4 brothers, along with one of her brother's friends, is studying to be a doctor in the civil war Sri Lanka, and the militant Tamil Tigers begin their revolt during her time when she's in school, and various things happen, and eventually this leads to civil war. And it's about her experience as a doctor, it's about her experience as a sister, it's about her experience as a young person growing up in the middle of violent conflict, and it's about her experience of that and about her role in that. It's just a fascinating and compelling book, and it's beautifully written and it's heartbreaking. It's just wonderful. So if you haven't gotten to Brotherless Night yet, I highly recommend it. There's really a blurring of the lines between which side are you on and why are you fighting and what is important, there's all this imbued meaning in the telling of this story. We'll talk more about it. I haven't actually wrapped this one up yet because I didn't end up doing a wrap up for May. Traveling to the UK kind of threw me off my upload schedule, so I think I'm going to do a recent reads video and talk a little bit about Brotherless Night and a couple of other books that I finished off in May for Misery May and for the May the Force Read With You readathon that I had made TBRs for. Another book that I just finished that is definitely one of the best books I've read so far this year is a book that I've just finished reading for the college reading vlog, which I'm also filming right now, and that's Housekeeping by Marilynne Robinson. This is such a good book. It's very literary with a capital L. It was written in 1980 and it's Marilynne Robinson's debut novel. It's about two sisters, Lucille and Ruth, whose mother, this isn't a spoiler, but their mother commits suicide and they are sent to live with their grandmother in a fictional town in Idaho called Fingerbone, which is a small town, and there's a lake by the town, and the lake is kind of this ominous, almost a character in the story. It's purported that their mother drowned herself in the lake and their grandfather died in a train wreck where the train plunged into the lake. So the lake has all of this history, especially in relation to the two girls. They're sent to live with their grandmother initially, and then their eccentric Aunt Sylvie comes from away to take care of them. She is very eccentric. She's almost like a nomad, like what we would refer to as a nomad today, but in the story she's referred to as a transient. So she doesn't like to keep house, hence the title Housekeeping. She is often wandering off in the wilderness and is often seen down by the lake. The story is told from Ruth's perspective, one of the sisters, and Lucille, the other sister, really can't abide by this transient, chaotic lifestyle that Sylvie is living and that they're being raised in because she's their caregiver. And so Lucille actually ends up leaving home, and it's really about this, it puts this juxtaposition between organized and controlled environments versus the natural, chaotic, unpredictable environment of nature, and calls into question this idea of human beings and our need to control things. And it's also about memory and about loss. There are a lot of different themes in the book, and so I don't want to go any further into it than that, but I just thought it was beautifully written. It's not a book that you can read really quickly. It's kind of a slow, you have to read it slowly to be able to appreciate it. But I should be finishing off the college reading vlog sometime in the next week or so, and so you'll be able to hear more about it when I post that video. So those are the two best books that I've read this year that I would add to my list. I have 5 up there right now. Will be really interesting to see what my final 10 end up being, like if some of those books get pushed out of the final 10 or not. I'm reading some amazing books right now though, because I'm judging for the Booktube Prize semifinals, and I can't talk about any of those books in this video. I've actually finished 2 of them and I can't include them in this video, so they're omitted from the video and they're not being included for consideration. I'm not going to say whether one of them that I've already read is one of the best books from this year, because I can't. We'll have to keep it a secret. The next question is, what's the best sequel that you've ever read? And I will be passing over that question because I don't read series generally. Occasionally I've read some mystery series, but I haven't been reading series this year at all, so I'm just going to skip over that question. So question number 3 is a new release that you haven't read yet from this year, but that you want to. So for me, the one that keeps coming back to my mind that I can't stop thinking about is a book that I talked about in one of my videos. I'll link it in the description box below, but in one of my videos from the Globe and Mail, one of those in that series that I've been doing. And it's a novel called The Alternatives by Colin Hughes, Irish writer. And I've heard really good things about this. It's about 4 sisters and they all lead very different lives. Their parents died when they were young under tragic circumstances. So one of the sisters goes missing or doesn't want to be found. For the first time in years, they're brought together in this very small Irish town in the Irish countryside, and they're looking for this sister. They're digging up the past in this process, exploring collectively what it looks like a very uncertain future. At least that's what I've gotten from the description. It just sounds really, really good. I can't stop thinking about it. So that is one that I would really like to get to. One other one that I haven't gotten to, which is a bit embarrassing that I haven't gotten to yet, is How to Build a Boat by Elaine Feeney. I still want to read How to Build a Boat, and I'm still trying to figure out how to get it into my list because it was so highly recommended in a lot of people's book recommendations over the past 6 months or so. Another one that I'm pretty desperate to get to is How to Say Babylon by Safia Sinclair. This has actually been out since last year. It's a memoir that I've been wanting to read. I actually gave it to a friend for Christmas in hard copy, but I picked up the paperback copy when I was in the UK recently. It was shortlisted in the nonfiction for the Women's Prize, and I've just heard nothing but fantastic things about it. It's about a young woman growing up in Montego Bay. Her father is Rastafarian, so it's about growing up in that environment. I also picked up at my friendly local bookstore, I picked up The Guest by Emma Cline on a recommendation from a friend. It sounds like it would be a great summer read, and I'm thinking about reading it in August. It's nice that it's out in paperback. I read The Girls by Emma Cline and really enjoyed it. So the whole time frame for this book takes place on Long Island leading up to Labor Day. So I think it'd be really fun to read it in August, but it doesn't say much on the back. It's just about a young woman who drifts around Long Island. I don't know, it doesn't really say anything in the description, and I don't really know very much about it. I just remember really enjoying The Girls, and I've heard a couple of people talking about this, and a friend of mine recommended it. So those are on kind of my radar for the upcoming months. Okay, question number 4, most anticipated release for the second half of 2024. I think for me, probably the most anticipated release, I don't pay a ton of attention to new releases coming up. I did just film a video with summer reads that had a bunch of releases that are coming out over the summer. One of the ones that looked really interesting to me from that list was Liars by Sarah Manguso, which is supposed to come out in July. It seems to already be getting a lot of really great reviews. It is about the 14-year implosion of a marriage between Jane, an American poet, and her husband John, a Canadian filmmaker, and it seems to be driven by professional jealousy, and it just sounds really dramatic and sounds really good. So I'd love to be able to get my hands on that if I could. And then Akwaeke Emezi has a new book coming out called Little Rot. Actually, I think it's already been published. It says first published June 18th. Now, I'm not sure if that's in Canada, by Riverhead Books. So that's also out, and I think that I'd love to be able to read that as well. It says, one weekend, the elite underbelly of a Nigerian city, a breakup that starts a spiral, a party that goes awry, a tangled web of sex and lies and corruption that leaves no one unscathed. Little Rot is a whirling journey through the city's dark side, told through the eyes of 5 people, each determined to run from the twisted powers out to destroy them. This sounds really good to me, and I'm a fan already of Akwaeke Emezi's work, so I definitely want to read that. That's very exciting. Those are some of the new releases that I'm really interested in. Question number 5 is, what is your biggest disappointment of the year? I've had a few disappointments this year. In the quarter year crisis tag, I talked about Boulder being a big disappointment, which it was. And since then, I think my biggest disappointment has probably been, and I hate to say it, Oh Caledonia by Elspeth Barker. I was really excited to read this book, and I ordered it, and it's a thin little book, but I made it 75 pages in, and I don't normally DNF, but I ended up DNFing this book because I just couldn't get into it, and that's very unusual for me. I said I thought I might go back to it. Maybe I will try to go back to it, but yeah, it just wasn't as compelling as I thought it was going to be. It was very slow. I just had trouble connecting to the main character, and the story just didn't seem to get going, and I had a really tough time with it. So that was a bit of a disappointment, unfortunately. But other than that, I haven't had that many. Again, I can't talk about the books that I'm reading for the Booktube prize, but it's also possible, just as it's possible that there was a book that might have been on my best books read in 2024 out of that grouping, there could also be one of the biggest disappointments of 2024 in that grouping. I am not going to say. My lips are sealed. Number 6, the biggest surprise this year. Biggest surprise this year. Well, so in terms of big surprises this year, I've had a lot. I would say like Invisible Man was a big surprise for me because I thought it was going to be really difficult and challenging, and it ended up being very accessible and very readable and very enjoyable. I discovered a couple of books from the first round of Booktube Prize judging that I did. In particular, Loved and Missed by Susie Boyd, which I really fell in love with. Like, I really, really adored this book. I mean, I wonder if this will be on my best books list for the end of the year. It was a wonderful, wonderful book. It surprised me. I wasn't expecting it. It was sad. It was wonderful. Also, And Then She Fell by Alicia Elliott, which I took out from the library and really enjoyed reading. It was longlisted for the Women's Prize, and it being the only Indigenous Canadian author, it was the first one that I got my hands on, and I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. I thought it was much better than some of the other heavy hitters on the list, and I thought it would have been really nice to see it go to the shortlist, although it didn't. But it was great. I think as a debut novel, it wasn't perfect, but I really recommend it if you haven't read it yet. Housekeeping has been a big discovery and a big surprise to me. So I've had a lot of wonderful surprises already this year, and I'm really looking forward to more of that. I think with the group that I'm reading for the Booktube Prize for the semifinals, there are a couple of books that I probably wouldn't be reading or hadn't expected to read, including Lone Woman and The Reformatory, and I'll just leave a link to the video where I talk about the books in my grouping in the description box below, but I think some of those could potentially be surprises as well. It's always exciting when you have surprises that you don't think you're gonna discover, either authors or books. That's pretty great. I've had a good year that way, for sure. And actually, the next question is favorite new author. That one's really tricky. I don't know if I have a favorite new author. Favorite is a very strong word, but I do think that I'd really like to read Megan Nolan's first book, because although Ordinary Human Failings wasn't my favorite book, it really piqued my curiosity about her as a writer. So I think Megan Nolan is like a new author who I'm curious about. The same applies to Rebecca Mackay, because I Have Some Questions for You, which I took out from the library, and although it wasn't as fantastic as I was hoping it would be, I've heard a lot of people talk about her other book, The Great Believers, saying that I should try that. So I think that would be great. I really enjoyed The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride, which has made me want to go back and read Deacon King Kong. So I do think that I've discovered a few authors already this year. I'm not sure about a new favorite though. I don't think I could commit to having found a new favorite author. That being said, I did read my first Toni Morrison this year, and I think Toni Morrison, like so many classic writers, stands in a league of her own, and I do think that that's a possibility that she could become a favorite writer. But I have to read Beloved. I have to read some other of her books. I read The Bluest Eye. So those are all possible new favorite authors. We'll see. I always have a little bit of a hard time doing these tags because I read classics and I also read current literary fiction, so they all get a little jumbled together in these tags, and I do find it a little bit confusing because when I read the classics, it's really hard for me to rank them in this way because, you know, they're classics for a reason often. Doesn't mean I love all the classics, but they're usually pretty amazing to have lasted the test of time. Newest fictional crush. I think I definitely had a fictional crush on our unnamed narrator in Invisible Man. I do think that, well, at least I was very, from the get-go, from the beginning, I was very protective of this character, and I was very invested in this character's well-being. So that's as close as I think you can come to a crush for someone who reads classics and literary fiction. I think that's it. I think I had a bit of a crush on Sashi in this one. Sashi also such an amazing character. Well, the next question is, who is your newest favorite character in a novel? And I do think that Sashi is probably one of my favorite characters that I've read so far. I also, in terms of great characters, I think the characters in Ordinary Human Failings are pretty fantastic too. Carmel is an amazing character. And although I couldn't really have a crush on Richie because he was too flawed for my taste. I certainly had definitely had a soft spot in my heart for Richie. I read the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. Definitely had a crush on Frederick Douglass for sure. I thought the characters in Big Swiss were fantastic. So Briefly a Delicious Life as well. George Sand is an amazing character and so well drawn in this novel. I had a girl crush on George, just like the ghost did in the story. Such a great character. And of course based on a real person, so that helps. There are just so many characters that I enjoyed in so many of the books that I read this year. I can't possibly talk about them all. A book that made you cry this year. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there were more than one. The one that made me really sob was Loved and Missed. This book made me cry, 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 cry. It was so heartbreaking and so heartwarming. It was very sad. Brotherless Night also made me cry. Is there a book that I read this year that did not make me cry? Is the question. Actually, the next question is a book that made you happy this year. And I think the book that made me maybe the happiest that I read this year, just reflecting back, I think the one that was the most feel good, a lot of them were dealing with very dark themes. And it's not to say that there weren't any dark themes in this book. I think it just made me happy because the characters and the way the story was told. Again, great characters in this novel as well. It's The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. That one also just left me with a really warm-hearted feeling. It's set in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and it's about really the immigrant population and the residents of this area called Chicken Hill, which is a neighborhood populated by immigrants, by especially immigrant Jews and African Americans, and it's about their community and the way that they survive and struggle and help each other. And although there's some dark aspects to this book, it definitely gives you that warm feeling of community. That was a good feeling book. I really enjoyed it. This question, I don't know how you're supposed to pick one. I mean, I don't know how you're supposed to pick one for any of these. I think I'm doing better this year than I did last year, but the most beautiful book you've bought or received so far this year. I gotta tell you, I haven't bought or received many beautiful books this year. I love the cover of Ordinary Human Failings, and when I went to Ottawa and I purchased this, I don't normally purchase hardback, as many of you know, but I just love the cover image of this book so much. Is it beautiful? Some other books that I think have beautiful covers. This book, Mothering by Ainsley Hogarth, which I still want to read maybe in August for Garb August. Look at that amazing cover. And then I picked up A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan because I really love this cover. I picked it up in the airport in the UK on my way home. And then Monsters, because I just think this image is so great. I guess it's a painting. I should know who it's by. There's no credit for this image. I'm sure it's a painting. I did buy the hard copy of James, which has a lovely gold, very simple gold spine, lettering on the spine. I'm going to be reading Ceremony for the college reading blog. This is not my copy, but I do think that that's a very pretty cover with the leaf on the front. So I do have books with nice covers, but no particularly gorgeous editions of books, not yet. Question number 13. What do you need to read by the end of the year? Well, for the remainder of the college reading blog, I need to read Ceremony. Oh, White Noise, I've already started. Boarding School Girl, I've already started. For the Booktube prize, I still have to read Lone Women, which I think might be the surprise that I was talking about. One of the surprises. I think it's going to be fantastic. The House of Doors, which I managed to get from the library. Wellness, which I managed to get from the library. And Formatory, which I got out of the library, which I've already started. And I am currently about halfway through East of Eden, which is a group read, which I'm reading with a group of viewers of the channel on Voxer. This book is so incredible. It's so good. It's so good. And I haven't really talked about it in answer to any of these questions because I'm not finished it yet, but I do think it's going to become like one of my favorite books of all time. John Steinbeck is just an incredible storyteller. In addition, I really feel that I really have to read this book, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, just because I keep talking about it and I haven't read it. Just think I'm gonna really enjoy it. So that I feel I need to read. In terms of books on my classics TBR, the one that I really want to get to is The Invention of Morel, because last year I read Our Share of Night and there was a reference to The Invention of Morel by the author, and so I really want to read it. It's a thin little book. I'm sure I'm going to be able to read it maybe around Halloween. And then my dear friend gave me a copy of Biography of X by Catherine Lacey, and I just really want to read it. It's important to me to prioritize the books that people have gifted me. I really want to make sure that I read it. She's also given me another book that I haven't read yet. It's a nonfiction book, but it's okay. This one, and then the next one. These are books that I really want to get to before the end of the year. I think that it's one of those tags where you're meant to tag other people to get them to do the mid-year freakout tag, and I really wanted to tag some new to me booktubers. So I'm going to tag Carrie at, her channel is at Bookish Adventures in Wellbeing, and she's a new to me booktuber who I think I also know over from Bookstagram. So Carrie, I'm tagging you in this. I don't know if Gretchen's not so new to me, but she's doing our read along for East of Eden. So Gretchen, if you haven't done your mid-year freakout tag yet, I'm tagging you. Hannah just tagged me in another tag. So hi Hannah, I'm gonna check out that video and look at that tag, but I'm gonna tag you in this one because you're a new to me booktuber as well. Oh, and I'm also gonna tag Sarah at Eyes on Indie. I'm curious, Sarah has such good reading taste. If you haven't checked out her channel, she does a lot of reviews about books that are published independently, and she has a really interesting channel, so I definitely recommend you check it out. Thank you so much for watching as usual, and I will see you in my next video. Bye everyone! Because last year I read Definitely Have a Crush on Frederick Douglass. I definitely had a crush on Frederick. Both prizes. I can't. Talked already in the quarter year that I'm doing with a group of which I'm doing with a group of people who and I looked back on my last two videos to see if I had, and then I think I also talked maybe about, I would have probably, I think I, that I know that